the places you are about to see, were never meant to survive. They were built quickly, used briefly, and abandoned without ceremony. For a moment in time, they became entire worlds, villages that never existed, towns that never lived, landscapes reshaped for stories meant to last forever on screen. Then the cameras stopped. No credits rolled for the land itself. No one stayed behind to protect what remained. Walls stood without purpose. Paths led nowhere. Silence returned. And into that silence, something older than cinema stepped forward. Rain began to fall where lights once burned. Roots searched beneath painted floors. Wind pulled at structures never designed to resist it. Slowly, patiently, the natural world reclaimed what had only been borrowed. This is the story of places caught between illusion and reality, between what they were built to be and what they were always destined to become. This is then and now, movie locations that nature took back. The camera does not move, yet everything in the frame is alive. Vines creep across cracked concrete. Moss thickens where footsteps once echoed. A collapsed roof lets sunlight pour onto a floor that once held actors, lights, and whispered lines. These places were built to deceive the eye, to create worlds that never existed. And yet, long after the cameras stopped rolling, something real arrived. Nature returned. Quietly, patiently, relentlessly. This is not a story about movies. This is a story about time. Across the world, film crews once transformed remote valleys, deserts, jungles, and abandoned towns into iconic cinematic landscapes. For a few brief weeks or months, these places were alive with generators, cables, shouting directors, and carefully rehearsed chaos. Then the crews left. What remained was never meant to last. Sets were abandoned, locations forgotten, and nature, which had been waiting long before the first camera arrived, began to take everything back. In this documentary journey, we move between then and now, between the illusion created for the screen and the reality that followed. These are movie locations reclaimed by forests, oceans, sand, and time itself. The first place lies deep within a jungle that never forgot what it was. In the late 1970s, the Philippine jungle became the stage for one of the most ambitious war films ever made. Helicopters thundered above treetops. Rivers were dammed and redirected. Entire villages were constructed from scratch. The production demanded absolute control over the environment. For a brief moment, the jungle was forced to obey. During filming, the set felt permanent. Wooden huts lined muddy paths. Smoke drifted constantly from controlled fires. The sounds of rotors and gunfire echoed day and night. The cast and crew lived among these structures for months, believing, at least subconsciously, that what they had built would remain. When filming ended, the crew packed up their equipment and left. What remained were villages without people, buildings without purpose, and scars cut into the earth. The jungle did not rush. Rain fell first, softening the edges of footprints and tire tracks. Seeds carried by wind and birds settled into cracks between boards. Insects returned in waves, nesting inside walls and under roofs. Within a year, vines had begun pulling walls apart. Within 5, the huts sagged and collapsed. Within a decade, it became difficult to tell where the set had been at all. Today, standing in the same location, there is no clear boundary between what was built and what was always there. Trees grow where actors once stood. Roots wrap around rusted nails. The jungle has not erased the set violently. It has absorbed it. Nature does not destroy. It reclaims. Across the ocean, another location tells a different story, one shaped not by jungle but by salt and wind. On a remote coastline, a fictional village was built for a historical epic. Dozens of stone-like buildings were constructed to look ancient, weathered, and eternal. From a distance, the village appeared to have stood for centuries. On screen, it became unforgettable. But the stones were not stone. They were shells. The walls were hollow, built quickly, never intended to survive storms. When the filming ended, the production company abandoned the village where it stood, perched on the edge of the sea. At first, the ocean was calm. Tourists came. Photographs were taken. The illusion remained intact. Then winter arrived. Waves struck the shoreline with growing force. Salt air crept into every crack. Wooden supports rotted from within. One by one, walls collapsed. Roofs caved in. Entire sections slid into the sea. Now, at low tide, pieces of the village can still be seen scattered across the beach like bones. At high tide, they vanish entirely beneath the waves. The ocean did not simply reclaim the set. It erased it, reminding everyone that permanence on a coastline is an illusion. The camera once framed these structures as timeless. Nature framed them as temporary. Not all abandoned locations disappear quickly. Some decay slowly, becoming frozen in a state between fiction and ruin. In a desert landscape, a small town was constructed to serve as the backdrop for multiple films. Streets were laid out. False storefronts were built. Windows were painted black to simulate depth. From the camera's perspective, the town was complete. After filming ended, no one dismantled it. The desert air was dry, the climate harsh but preserving. For years, the town stood almost unchanged. Wind sanded the edges of signs. Paint faded. Wooden boards cracked under the sun. Nature here did not overwhelm. It refined. Today, the town still stands, but it no longer pretends to be alive. Doors hang open. Floors are buried in sand. Lizards move freely through buildings designed for humans who never truly lived there. The desert has not reclaimed the town through growth, but through erosion and silence. It is a reminder that nature takes many forms. Sometimes it arrives as vines and roots, sometimes as sun and dust. Far from deserts and jungles, another location sits quietly in a temperate forest, where seasons do the slow work of decay. For a fantasy film, a small village was built beside a river. Unlike most sets, this one was meant to feel warm, lived in, and permanent. Real wood was used. Stone foundations were laid. Gardens were planted. When filming ended, the decision was made to leave the village standing. At first, caretakers maintained it. Tourists arrived. The village became a destination, suspended between fiction and reality. But maintenance slowed, funding faded, caretakers left. Without human presence, the forest moved closer each year. Leaves clogged pathways. Moss covered rooftops. Trees sprouted where fences once stood. The river flooded its banks during heavy rains, weakening foundations. Now, the village exists in a state of quiet surrender. Buildings still stand, but nature has woven itself into every corner. Birds nest in chimneys. Roots crack stone steps. The forest does not hide the village, it claims it openly. This location shows that even when humans try to preserve illusion, nature eventually rewrites the script. These places share a common truth. They were never meant to last. Movie locations are built to serve a moment, a scene, a story. Once the story is told, their purpose ends. Nature, however, does not recognize endings. It only recognizes opportunity. In every abandoned set, there is a pause, a moment where nothing happens, and then slowly the world resumes its original rhythm. Grass grows, water flows, wind wears away edges, life returns. What makes these locations powerful is not their decay, but what that decay reveals. The contrast between the control of filmmaking and the patience of nature, between the urgency of production schedules and the endless timeline of the natural world. The camera once commanded these places. Now the earth does. And this is only the beginning. In some places, nature does not reclaim quietly. It arrives all at once, reshaping landscapes so completely that even memory struggles to hold on. High in the mountains, a remote valley once hosted a film crew chasing realism. Snow, isolation, and raw terrain were essential to the story. Rather than build sets, the production altered what already existed. Cabins were reinforced, paths were carved into slopes, equipment was hauled across frozen ground. For a few months, the valley belonged to cinema. When filming ended, the crew departed before winter fully closed in. The valley was left altered but unattended. Snow fell early that year. Heavy storms buried roads, crushed temporary structures, and erased paths. Avalanches swept down slopes, tearing apart anything fragile. By spring, the valley no longer resembled the place the crew had known. Today, satellite images struggle to identify the filming sites. Cabins lie collapsed beneath decades of snow and debris. Wooden beams are embedded in ice. The mountains did not merely reclaim the location. They sealed it away, preserving fragments beneath layers of time. Here, nature did not erase the past. It archived it. In contrast, there are places where nature's return feels almost intimate. In a quiet countryside, a modest house was chosen as the primary location for a deeply personal film. It was not a set. It was a real home, temporarily transformed. Walls were repainted, furniture rearranged. Life paused. After production, the house was left empty. The owners never returned. Without heat, without care, the building began to change. Moisture crept in through aging windows. Wallpaper peeled. Floorboards warped. Mice nested behind walls. Ivy climbed steadily, finding weak points in brick and mortar. Years later, the house stands surrounded by overgrowth. From a distance, it appears peaceful, almost picturesque. Up close, decay is everywhere. The garden has become a meadow. Trees grow dangerously close to the structure, their roots undermining the foundation. Unlike grand sets or exotic locations, this place reminds us that nature does not need spectacle to reclaim space. It works just as effectively on the ordinary. Some abandoned movie locations do not disappear into forests or oceans. Instead, they become islands of ruin surrounded by human life. In a bustling urban area, an entire street was constructed for a crime film. Facades were built against existing structures. Interiors were left unfinished, never meant to be seen. When filming ended, the production removed what it needed and left the rest behind. City planners had other priorities. The street remained unused. Over time, it fell into neglect. Plants forced their way through cracks in asphalt. Rain pooled in basements. Graffiti spread across walls. What had once been a carefully controlled illusion of decay became real decay itself. Residents passed by daily, often unaware that the structures had ever been part of a film. Nature's presence here was subtle but persistent. Even surrounded by concrete and traffic, it found a way in. This is nature adapting, reclaiming space even within human systems designed to resist it. There are locations where nature's return creates something new, something neither purely artificial nor entirely wild. In a river delta, a massive set was built to replicate an ancient settlement. Canals were dug. Wooden walkways were installed. The water was redirected and controlled. When the crew left, the controls failed. Water returned to its original paths. Flooding reshaped the land. Fish entered canals meant only for cameras. Birds nested in abandoned structures. Over time, the set became part of the ecosystem. The artificial canals now support plant life. Wooden structures provide shelter for animals. What was once a temporary illusion has become a functional environment. Here, nature did not simply take back what was lost. It repurposed it. As decades pass, these locations become harder to classify. Are they ruins? Are they habitats? Are they historical sites? They exist in between. Film historians seek them out, hoping to preserve a connection to cinematic history. Explorers photograph them, drawn to the beauty of decay. Environmentalists study how ecosystems adapt to human-made structures. Each group sees something different. Nature sees none of it. It does not care about stories told on screen or memories held by audiences. It responds only to absence. When humans leave, space opens, and nature fills it. There is a quiet irony in all of this. Movies are made to be immortal, preserved on film, streamed endlessly, revisited by new generations. The locations where those stories were brought to life are not granted the same privilege. They fade, they change, they vanish, and perhaps that is fitting. Cinema captures moments, nature measures time. Where filmmakers work in weeks and months, nature works in decades and centuries. Where sets are built to deceive, nature builds with intention. Every vine creeping across a wall, every root breaking through concrete, every wave pulling stone into the sea is part of a larger story, one that began long before cameras arrived and will continue long after the last trace of human presence disappears. Standing at one of these locations today, it is impossible not to feel small. You can imagine the past, the lights, the voices, the carefully planned chaos. You can also see the present, the silence, the growth, the slow unraveling. The two moments exist in the same place, layered atop one another. Then, and now, nature does not rush to erase evidence of human creativity. It allows it to linger, to soften, to be transformed. In doing so, it reminds us that nothing we build is separate from the world it occupies. We borrow land. We borrow space. We borrow time. Eventually, everything is returned. This is not a story of loss. It is a story of balance. A reminder that while movies may shape our imagination, the earth shapes everything else. And no matter how convincing the illusion, nature is always waiting, patient, silent, unstoppable. When the credits roll and the screen fades to black, the real world continues. And in that world, nature always takes the final shot.